Hi, welcome. My name is Nilesh. In this video, I am going to talk about Microsoft certification exam preparation for DP200. This exam is about implementing an Azure Data Solution. In the last 3 months, I have completed a couple of Azure certifications. I completed AZ301, which is the Azure Architect design. I completed the AZ400, designing and implementing Microsoft DevOps solution, and just yesterday I completed DP200. So when I posted about this on my LinkedIn profile and Twitter, many people have been asking me about my exam preparations. How did I prepare for these exams, and what tools or what services did I use? So this video is all about how I went about preparing for this DP200 exam. If you are new to Microsoft certifications and you don't know which one to start with, I recommend that you have a look at this wonderful post by Thomas Maurer, where he talks about the role-based certifications which Microsoft has introduced for Azure. And if we look at this blog, we find that there is the fundamentals, which is common to all the Azure services. If you want to know very basic fundamentals of cloud computing, you can pick up this certification. And then there are associate and expert level certifications. These are again divided into apps and infra and the data and AI categories. So when we go down, if we look at the Azure applications and infrastructure certifications, we start with the optional Azure fundamentals, and then we can take up for the associate level certificates, the Azure Administrator Associate, the Developer Associate, or the Security Engineer Associate. And when we complete the Azure Administrator Associate or the Developer Certificate or Developer Associate exam, and we take up the Azure DevOps Engineer, we also get the Azure DevOps Engineer Expert level certification. And same way, when we take up the architect level certifications, the AZ300 and 301, we get the Azure Architect Expert. In the data and AI side of things, the things are slightly different. Most of the certificates now, they are associate level. So we have the Azure Data Scientist Associate, Azure Data Engineer Associate, and the AI Engineer Associate certificates. And at the bottom of this post, there are also the exams which needs to be taken if there are any prerequisites. These are nicely summarized. So I highly recommend that you go through this blog if you want to understand which certification exam you should take based on your current role or the role that you want to apply for in future. This post or this blog also has detailed exam study guides which Thomas Maurer publishes for the exams that he has taken, like AZ900, AZ104, 204, 303. You can go through all of these details. Once you have chosen the exam, so in my case, I was taking up the DP300 test or exam. This is targeted for the Microsoft Azure data engineers. I've been working with data engineering for last 4 or 5 years. I've worked as a big data engineer or big data architect working on-premise on Hortonworks platform, and I've also worked on things like HD Insight on Azure, and currently I'm working with modern data warehouse architecture on Azure, which involves things like the Azure SQL database, Azure Synapse Analytics, Azure Data Lake Storage, Data Factory, and Azure Databricks. So I'm quite familiar with these services, and hence I decided to take up this test. If you look at the requirements for this particular test, so when I go into the Microsoft Docs and I look at the exam details, here you can find what are the skills which will be measured. So in terms of the skills, this particular test is focused around 40 to 45% of the questions would be related to data storage solutions. Then 25% to 30% of the questions are managing and developing data processing. And finally, the rest of the 30-35% is spread across monitoring and optimizing the data solutions. I also have the complete list of skills which are measured. So when we look into this, we can see each of these high-level topics, what are the things that this exam tries to measure your skills against. So I can say these are mainly into three categories: implementing the solution, monitoring it, and then optimizing these solutions. And these are divided into the batch processing as well as streaming. So in my case, I'm very familiar with batch processing. I know the basic concept of streaming, but I haven't had any in-depth experience of implementing a streaming solution. So once I got the skills which needs to be measured, I went and looked at in the same exam preparation page or the exams page on MSLearn. They also give us the option of taking these free online courses or the learning paths. I find these learning paths very helpful. So if you are new to Azure and you want to learn in detail about different services, different technologies available on Azure, I personally find these learning paths very, very helpful. So specifically for this DP200 test, there are 7 learning paths, 6 or 7, I guess, which are available here. So it starts with Azure for Data Engineers. It's a beginner level module, and it consists of 3 other modules. And similarly, we have things like storing of data in Azure, working with relational databases. What I did was I also listed these down in the Excel sheet. So all these modules and approximate duration to complete those modules. So if I were to go through all of those modules, it's about 23 hours of effort which is required to complete the MSLearn, the free courses or the free learning path related modules. Since I already had a bit of background in data engineering and I'm currently working in my current job on Azure services, I did not go through this. Instead of going through this learning paths, I went through, let me just close this. I went through LinuxAcademy course. So there are multiple e-learning options which are available. In the past, I have used things like Udemy or Pluralsight. I am a huge fan of Pluralsight. When it comes to in-depth technical knowledge, I think Pluralsight has one of the best authors available, and their courses are very good. But in my opinion, when it comes to certification courses, one of the difficulty I had with something like Pluralsight is their courses are designed and developed by different authors. So if you look at the same DP200, they have about 10 hours of content just for implementing the storage solutions in Microsoft Azure, 9 hours of content for implementing the data processing, 6 hours for Azure Data Solutions, then the monitoring is 7 hours, and each of these are basically combined courses from different authors. So you look at the first one, which is storage solutions for Microsoft Azure. There are 4 courses here available as part of this higher level module, and these are done by 3 different authors. So the problem I face, or the difficulty I had with these kind of courses, is you find a lot of overlapping information, and since these are done by different authors, the levels are also different. You see, it's intermediate here, whereas the implementing cloud data warehouse is advanced level, hybrid data solutions is at advanced level. So you will find different authors giving information at different level of granularity, and it can be sometimes a bit confusing or hard to follow. So that's why I prefer having a preparation for these exam courses which are done by single authors, and that's where I find LinuxAcademy's course of DP200 very helpful. This is done by so let me just search quickly here in the LinuxAcademy. If I look for DP200, we will find 2 courses here. So the first one is done by Brian Roham, and this is the exam preparation, and the second one is like the actual exam or the quiz. So I refer to this one. This is intermediate level, and this has overall 12 hours of content, and this covers all those concepts or all the skills which are required. And the good thing I find about LinuxAcademy is, first, it gives you the option to build your schedule. So when I register for a course, I can go and create a schedule. So the best part I find when I start building a schedule is I can define my availability. So in my own time zone, I can go and define the availability in terms of days of the week. So I can say on a particular day like Sunday or weekend or regular day, how much amount of time I can dedicatedly spend on this particular course, and based on this it will come up with a schedule. So this really helps to identify how much time it will take to prepare for the complete course, and based on this I can decide when I can take up the test. In my personal experience, again, I would say if we are spending 12 hours going through the videos, I would personally recommend to spend twice the amount of time practicing. So about 24 hours doing the actual practical stuff on the hands-on labs, either as part of LinuxAcademy itself or as part of the Azure subscription. So this is a second common question I get from many of the people, that if I go through a course, where can I practice those things? This is another reason why I personally find LinuxAcademy to be a very good investment in terms of your learning. They have these hands-on labs, and you can see here that for things like introduction into the Azure blob storage, they have about 45 minutes of lab, and for other services like provisioning Cosmos DB instance, the lab is available for 1 hour 30 minutes. So we don't have to have separate Azure subscription. As part of our LinuxAcademy subscription itself, we get these hands-on labs where we get actual Azure environment available to us, and we can take up these multiple times. So it's not like if I complete the hands-on lab once, I cannot do this same thing again. If I feel I'm not comfortable or I didn't get the complete understanding in the first attempt, I can go back, I can do this same hands-on labs again. The other part where we can get these hands-on labs or similar feature is in the learning paths of MS Learn. So let me pull out one of these. So these also, they have the hands-on labs, but these are limited to number of hours. So I think currently when the VMs or the hands-on labs for MS Learn are created, you get daily about 10 hours worth of free credits or free VMs which are provisioned dynamically. So once we have the hands-on labs and once we know how much time it takes, we can decide when to take up the test. So that was the LinuxAcademy. I explained about the schedule part and also the hands-on labs. I really found these hands-on labs useful. So in my case, since I already knew some of these concepts, what I did was I took up the practice test and I took it up multiple times. This gave me the confidence of how well I know some of the concepts. And if you look at the challenge history, I in fact failed in the first attempt, which I took on 27th of July. And this helped me to identify the areas where I needed to focus. Since I don't know much about streaming or the stream analytics, to be very specific, I could not answer those questions which were related to the stream analytics in the first attempt. And then when I went through the modules, I focused my energy on making sure that I understand all the core concepts related to streaming. And for that matter, I use the OneNote to note down all the things that I study. So OneNote is one of my favorite tool which I use quite extensively. Different people have different ways of studying and grasping the information. Your mileage may vary based on your preferred mode of learning. For me, if I have to understand a concept, I need to do it practically. Only then I can grasp it very well. I've seen some people who can learn, they can just pick up stuff by looking at some YouTube videos or online material, or they can pick up stuff by going through a book. This again varies by individual, and as I said, for me, I need to have the practical experience to get the best out of something. So what I tend to do is I look through the videos, I go through the available materials, and then I make my own notes. What I like about OneNote is I could use these different color combinations, and I can use a combination of pictures, graphics, and that's where my study materials or the notes, they really help me. I also make it a point to go through all the notes. So here is an example where I have a mix of the colors as well as graphics to highlight certain things and to make sure that some things which are very important to a related concept, these are captured and these are easily available. So when I start building these notes, I start from one particular topic and I also keep going through them again and again on a daily basis. So that way, when I come to the last part, I know that I have revised this and I'm quite comfortable with all these topics which are covered. If I don't feel comfortable with something, it also helps me to go back and focus on those areas. So that is my another tip or how I prepare myself. I also heard many people asking over LinkedIn or on the Facebook pages where some of these course materials are promoted or they're available, some user groups, that are there any dumps available. Personally, I don't believe in dumps and I don't encourage people to use dumps. If you want to study a technology, if you want to learn something, if you want to pass your certification to get better at your job or to get a next job, I would rather say you spend time practicing, you spend time learning that technology very well rather than going through the dump. I would like to share a small story which happened to one of my colleagues very early in my career. I think it was back in 2003, 2004 when ASP.NET was quite new and many people were taking up the ASP.NET related certification. One of my colleagues, he went and took the certification by taking some dumps and he cleared it with very good marks. I think he scored more than 90% with the help of dumps. And the very next day when he had to work on a project, he came back asking with a very simple question like, what is the difference between client-side programming and server-side programming? Now, if you cleared ASP.NET kind of test with 90% of marks, and if you don't understand the difference between client and server programming, I think that's not a good sign. So that's why based on that experience, I would rather say you spend enough time, you make an effort, don't take any shortcuts. The only shortcut I would take is the keyboard shortcuts, just on a lighter note. So I don't prefer taking shortcuts, especially when it comes to learning technology. So if you are asking me if there are any dumps available, they might be available, but I don't recommend using them. So that's how I prepared. So I prepared with the help of mainly LinuxAcademy, and then I spent time answering these exams. The exam which comes as part of this course itself on LinuxAcademy, and then I also spent time on my personal Azure subscription trying out the things which I didn't know. One thing which I really found useful was the streaming part. So when it comes to the questions in the actual exam, there is a lot of emphasis, or we need to really understand how streaming works and how the different options when it comes to the windowing works. So if you are not familiar with different types of windows, like the session window or tumbling windows, there are scenario based questions which are related to these different ways in which we can combine or we can get the output of a streaming process using the windowing functions. So it's very important that we understand the different types of windows and when to apply that particular windowing functions in which scenario. I found at least 2 or 3 questions which were surrounded or which were around this topic of the streaming and the windowing functions. Apart from that, I would recommend that do not focus only on one area or only on one source of information. So LinuxAcademy is one for me. Then the second information or second reference was these learning paths, and then also the actual experience on working on the Azure portal. The other difference I found with the test is if you take up this test which comes with LinuxAcademy, this is pretty straightforward. You will get multiple choice questions. Even in the actual test, all the questions are multiple choice questions. But the difference is, in this sample test on LinuxAcademy, the questions are very straightforward. Whereas when it comes to the actual test on DP200 certification exam, you will have case studies, you will have the questions where you really need to have working experience on Azure. If you expect to clear the test DP200 by just going through MS Learn and by just going through LinuxAcademy without doing any hands-on, I can bet that you are not going to clear the test. The reason for that is there are many questions which require you to answer the exact steps which are required for particular actions, and not just the steps, they are required to be in the right sequence as well. So let me give you one example. There was a question regarding Polybase and how do we set up Polybase, how do we authenticate or authorize Polybase users to access the Azure storage, data lake storage, and there were questions around the managed service identities. So these kind of questions, they had in some cases 3 right choices, in some cases 5 or 4 right choices, and once you know which options or which choices to be applied, you also had to sequence them in the right order. So if you have not gone through Azure portal, if you have not done those things in the hands-on lab, you will not be able to get that answer correctly. So that's why I recommend that you spend enough time on actually doing these stuff on the portal, and it's very important to understand the core concepts which are related to this, because most of the questions are very situational, and they are based on case studies, or they are focused around business problems, and they require us to know the subtle differences between one particular choice or the other one. So that's why I feel that the questions which are listed in this sample test here, they are I would say easy to medium level of complexity, whereas the ones which come in the actual test, they are of slightly higher complexity. So that's why it's very, very important to have the actual hands-on experience so that you know which steps and in what order they need to be followed. Apart from this, I would recommend that if you don't have LinuxAcademy subscription, or if you don't want to go with LinuxAcademy, and let's say you have subscription with some other online e-learning sites like Udemy, it's fine. Udemy also has many courses. For example, if I just look for DP200, I found so many of the courses listed down. I was referring to Scott Duffy's course on the AZ300. So I know that even by looking at the number of people who have recommended his course here, quite high, he is one of the good authors, but there might be others. Your mileage will definitely vary based on your existing skills and the knowledge that you have about Azure. I'm not very particular about where do you refer to for the exam. It could be Udemy, it could be Pluralsight, it could be LinuxAcademy. As long as I think you have good exposure in terms of knowing which service to be used for which kind of operation or which data activity, that's good enough, and you need to have enough hands-on experience. That's what I would stress again and again, that without doing hands-on, I can definitely say that it would be very difficult for you to clear this exam. So I hope I have given enough information. Again, going back, it doesn't really matter which platform you choose to start or use as a reference. You can be comfortable with one author or the other. Just make sure that you understand the core concepts, the ones which are listed in the exam preparation, the major skills which are measured, and then you are able to justify the different choices. So with that, I hope that you found this information useful. If there is something which I am missing, do feel free to put it in the comments. I will put all these links as references in the description below. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you find it useful. If you find it useful, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.